At my fiancé's house, I overheard him talking to his parents, and what I heard shattered me to pieces. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily, I'm 27, and for the last 2 years I believed I was living a dream. I met Ryan at a friend's barbecue, and from the first conversation, I thought he was different. He had this way of making me laugh, even when I wasn't in the mood. He always remembered the little things, how I liked my coffee, the way I tapped my pen when I was thinking, the songs that calmed me on stressful days. Those tiny details made me believe he truly cared. When he proposed after 1.5 years, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes, thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. 6 months away from our wedding, everything seemed like it was falling into place. We had picked the venue, the flowers, even the flavors of cake. My dress was already hanging in my closet at home. I couldn't stop myself from daydreaming about walking down the aisle, seeing him at the end waiting for me, smiling the way he did when he knew he had my whole heart. Part of why I loved Ryan so much was his family. His parents, Linda and Mark, welcomed me with open arms. They called me their future daughter, and made sure I felt comfortable every time I visited. Sunday dinners at their house became a routine, and I honestly looked forward to them. His mom taught me a few of her recipes, and his dad teased Ryan about how he had finally done something right by finding me. It felt warm, safe, like the family I always dreamed of being part of. That night, when I went over to stay for the weekend, everything seemed normal at first. Linda hugged me at the door, Mark asked about work, and Ryan carried my bag upstairs like he always did. We ate dinner together, laughing over some silly story Mark was telling about his younger days. Afterward, everyone went their separate ways, his parents to their room, Ryan to grab something from the kitchen, and me upstairs to get a sweater I'd left in my bag. I remember how quiet the house felt as I walked down the hall. The lights were dim, and I could hear faint voices. At first, I thought nothing of it, just casual talking. But then I recognized Ryan's voice. He was in his parents' room, the door not completely shut. I paused for just a second, and that single moment changed everything. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but his tone stopped me in my tracks. There was no laughter in his voice, no warmth, only seriousness. My hand froze on the railing as my chest tightened. Something told me I needed to hear this, even if part of me already feared what it could be. As I stood there in the hallway, I realized I was hearing Ryan's voice more clearly now. He wasn't joking or telling a story. His tone was sharp, serious. I held my breath and leaned just enough to hear without being seen. "I know what I'm doing," Ryan was saying. "Emily has a solid career. She's got savings, and after her grandmother passed, she's sitting on a comfortable inheritance. This marriage will make sure I'm set." My stomach dropped. For a moment I thought I had misheard, that maybe he was talking about someone else. But then his mother's voice cut in, calm and approving. "She's sweet, Ryan. Sweet and naive. A girl like that won't question you. You're making a smart move. Security like that doesn't come often." I felt my legs weaken. My hand tightened on the railing, my sweater forgotten. The walls of that house suddenly felt smaller, like they were pressing in on me. My fiancé, my supposed partner for life, wasn't marrying me out of love. He was marrying me for money. Then I heard his father speak, his tone low but firm. "Your mother's right. You've always been ambitious. Emily's a good choice for stability. Just don't mess this up by showing your hand too early. Keep her happy, make her feel special, and you'll have everything you need." Each word struck me like a hammer. Everything I thought was real between us, every promise, every late-night conversation about our future, it all twisted into something ugly. I could hear Ryan responding again, almost smug. "She already trusts me completely. She thinks this wedding is about love. By the time she realizes, everything will already be mine." I pressed my back against the wall, heart pounding so loudly I worried they might hear me. My throat burned, my eyes stung, but I couldn't move. I couldn't stop listening. My mind replayed every moment Ryan had pushed me to add him to my accounts, how he'd insisted on bigger wedding plans because we deserve the best, how he never hesitated when I offered to cover deposit. It all made sense now, but in the worst way. His mother spoke again, softer this time, almost proud. "You're securing your future, Ryan. That's what matters. Emily will thank you one day for taking care of her, even if she doesn't see it yet." I bit down hard on my lip to keep from making a sound. The image of the man I thought I knew cracked right in front of me. The warmth in his smile, the tenderness in his touch, it was all a mask. I turned slowly, carefully, and walked back down the hall before my knees gave out. I clutched the railing like it was the only thing keeping me standing. My chest felt heavy, my breath shallow. Betrayal wasn't even a strong enough word for what I felt in that moment. I wanted to scream, to storm into that room, to demand answers. But instead, I stayed quiet, swallowed my tears, and walked away. I walked back toward the guest room as quietly as I could, each step heavy as if I were carrying the weight of 100 lies on my shoulders. My chest felt tight, and I pressed a hand against it, trying to steady my breathing. The words I had just heard wouldn't leave my head. They played again and again, louder each time, until it felt like they were carved into me. When Ryan first asked me to open a joint account, he framed it as a step toward trust. He had said, "We're building a life together, Em. It makes sense to start blending things now." I remembered how proud I felt agreeing, thinking it meant we were closer, stronger. But now I saw it clearly. He had been setting the stage from the start. The same applied to the wedding. He had been the one pushing for the expensive venue, the extravagant decorations, the open bar. Whenever I hesitated, worried about the costs, he smiled and told me not to stress, that I could handle it, and that it would all be worth it in the end. At the time, I believed him. I wanted the day to be magical, and I convinced myself he just wanted the same. But standing there in that hallway, I understood. He never wanted the wedding for love. He wanted it for what I could provide. I felt tears building, but I forced them back. The last thing I wanted was for Ryan or his parents to see my face red and swollen. I knew if I let even one tear slip, I would fall apart, and I couldn't afford that. Not here. Not now. I had to protect myself, and that meant staying silent, at least until I figured out what to do. I closed the guest room door behind me and leaned against it, my knees threatening to give out. The sweater I had gone upstairs for lay forgotten in my bag. I couldn't even think straight. My mind bounced from one memory to another, searching for proof that what I had with Ryan was real. His late-night texts, the flowers he sometimes brought, the way he brushed my hair from my face when I was tired. I wanted so badly for at least some of it to mean something. But after what I heard, I couldn't tell the difference between love and performance anymore. The hardest part was realizing how blind I had been. Everyone always told me I was smart, practical, careful with my choices. But here I was, about to marry a man who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. The shame of it burned through me almost as much as the heartbreak. I wiped my face quickly, forcing myself to breathe slow and steady. This wasn't the time to collapse. I needed to think, to plan. Confronting him tonight would only expose what I knew, and I wasn't ready for that. I had to be patient. I had to stay quiet, at least for now. That night, when I finally lay in bed beside Ryan, I kept my breathing steady and my eyes closed until I was sure he had drifted off. He wrapped an arm around me like he always did, and I forced myself not to flinch. To him, everything was normal. To me, nothing was. I stared into the dark, making a promise to myself. I would not let him use me. The next morning, I smiled at him like nothing was wrong. I kissed him before we left his parents' house and asked about his plans for the day, just as I always did. He didn't suspect a thing. Inside, though, every word out of my mouth was measured. Every smile was calculated. If he could play a role, then so could I. When I got back home, I went straight to my computer. My hands trembled as I logged into our joint account. My stomach twisted seeing how much money I had already poured into deposits and expenses under his encouragement. Quietly, without saying a word to him, I began moving what remained of my savings into an account he couldn't touch. Each transfer felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he had tried to steal. It wasn't just about money. I reached out to the lawyer who had handled my grandmother's estate, asking questions about how my inheritance was protected. I didn't go into details, just enough to make sure there were barriers Ryan could never cross. Knowing those safeguards were in place gave me the first bit of peace I'd felt since that night. The only person I trusted enough to tell was my best friend, Sarah. We had been inseparable since college, and she knew me better than anyone. I sat across from her at our favorite cafe, stirring my coffee just to give my hands something to do. When I finally told her what I overheard, her eyes filled with anger. "Emily, you can't marry him," she said firmly. "You need to walk away before he takes anything more from you." I shook my head. If I leave now, he'll never face what he did. He'll just move on to the next person and do it again. I can't let that happen. He needs to be exposed for what he is. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I get it, but you have to be careful. Don't let him see that you know." "Not yet." I promised her I would stay cautious. Every day after that, I kept up the act. I laughed at Ryan's jokes, held his hand in public, even discussed wedding plans with him like everything was normal. But behind the scenes, I was laying the groundwork, pulling away financially, protecting what was mine, and planning for the moment when his lies would finally come crashing down on him. He thought he was clever, but he had no idea who he was really dealing with. Ryan became more pushy about the wedding as the weeks went by. He brought home glossy brochures for things we didn't need, an upgraded venue package, extra courses for the dinner, a larger band. Every time I raised an eyebrow, he brushed it off with a grin. "Come on, Emily. This is our big day. We should do it right. You can afford it, and you know it'll be worth it." His words stung, but I smiled and nodded like I believed him. Inside, though, I was boiling. Every suggestion he made, Every way he leaned on me financially only proved what I already knew. He wasn't excited about celebrating our love. He was excited about what my money could buy him. Still, I kept playing along. I told him I loved his ideas, that I wanted the wedding to be as special as he did. I acted like I was eager to write checks and sign papers. What he didn't know was that behind the scenes, I was changing everything. I set up a private meeting with the wedding planner. Sitting across from her in her office, I explained that all contracts and final payments needed to be paused until further notice. I told her to put everything under my name, not his. She gave me a curious look, but she didn't argue. I left with every document in my possession, tucked safely in a folder he'd never see. Meanwhile, when Ryan asked about progress, I reassured him. I told him the planner had everything under control, that deposits were already sent. His face lit up every time, so sure that things were moving exactly how he wanted. He even bragged once about how generous I was being, saying, "Not every guy gets a fiancé willing to invest this much in the future." I swallowed my anger and let him think he was winning. At night, I lay awake next to him, my mind racing with plans. I couldn't let him see even a crack in the mask I wore. If he had any clue, he would twist it, charm me, or maybe even try to trap me before I could act. So I stayed calm, patient, and deliberate. Sarah was the only one who knew what I was doing. Every time we met, she checked in, making sure I hadn't slipped, making sure I was still safe. She warned me not to let the act consume me, but I told her I was fine. The truth was, it was exhausting. Smiling when I wanted to scream, agreeing when I wanted to say no. But I reminded myself daily, it would be worth it in the end. The closer we got to the wedding date, the more Ryan celebrated. He talked about the life we would have, about how we'd be set for years once everything was done. He had no idea that every time he spoke those words, my determination grew stronger. He thought he was securing his future, but I was the one building the trap. A week before the wedding, Ryan sat across from me at the kitchen table, flipping through a binder of contracts. He tapped the page with a satisfied grin. "We just need to cover the last payments, and then everything's locked in." I looked him right in the eye and smiled. "Don't worry, I'll handle it. I'll make the payments this week." He leaned back in his chair, smug and comfortable, certain I was doing exactly what he expected. I kept my voice steady, even playful, but inside I was already several steps ahead of him. That night, when he fell asleep beside me, I sat in the living room with my laptop and a stack of paper. I began to write. Every word I overheard in his parents' bedroom was still burned into my memory, and I put it all down, his confession, their encouragement, every line that had ripped me apart. I kept my writing simple, clear, and undeniable. I made sure the story couldn't be twisted, no matter how hard he tried to deny it later. I printed several copies and sealed them in envelopes. Each one was addressed, one for Ryan, one for his parents, and a few more for close friends who would be at the rehearsal dinner. If he wanted to pretend he loved me, I was going to show everyone exactly what kind of man he really was. As I folded the last letter and slid it into the envelope, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear I'd carried since that night in the hallway was still there, but now it was mixed with purpose. He had plotted to secure his future at my expense, but I was about to take that security from him in one blow. I rehearsed my plan carefully. The rehearsal dinner was perfect. It would gather both families and some of our closest friends in one place. Ryan expected me to toast to our future, to gush about the man I loved. Instead, I would stand up and reveal the truth. I made arrangements quietly. I confirmed with the restaurant manager that I could have a moment to speak before dessert was served. He didn't ask questions, just nodded. I tucked the envelopes into my purse, ready to hand them out once the words were spoken. All week, Ryan walked around in high spirits, bragging to his friends on the phone, talking about the life we were about to start. He didn't notice how I studied him, how I memorized every smirk, every careless word. He thought he had already won. When he kissed me goodbye one evening and told me how lucky he was, I smiled back, my voice warm. "I feel the same way," I said. But as I closed the door behind him, my smile faded. In just a few days, his luck would run out, and he wouldn't even see it coming. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Both families sat together at a long table, plates cleared, wine poured, and everyone in high spirits. Ryan looked especially pleased, leaning back in his chair as if the world already belonged to him. His arm rested on the back of my chair, casual, confident. I kept my smile in place, waiting for the right moment. When the waiter stepped aside after pouring more wine, I stood slowly. "I just want to say a few words," I began, my voice steady but carrying through the room. Everyone quieted, smiling at me, expecting a sweet toast. Ryan turned toward me with that grin I once adored. "First, thank you all for being here," I said. "Family and friends mean everything, and tonight was supposed to be a celebration of love and the future." I paused, my eyes sweeping over the table. "But before we move forward, I think it's only fair that the truth comes out." A murmur passed through the room. Ryan's smile faltered. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse and opened it slowly. My hands didn't shake. My voice was clear. Word for word, I read what I had overheard in his parents' bedroom. His voice bragging about marrying me for financial security. His parents calling me sweet but naive. His father telling him to keep me happy until he had everything he wanted. Gasps echoed around the table. I heard a fork clatter to the floor. Ryan's face drained of color. "Emily, what the hell are you?" he started. But I held up my hand and continued, not giving him the chance to twist anything. His mother stared at the table, pale and stiff. His father shifted in his chair, jaw tight. Sarah, seated a few places down, leaned forward with a look that was part fury, part pride. When I finished reading, I folded the paper neatly and set it down. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "That is the man I was about to marry. But not anymore. The wedding is canceled. My belongings are already moved out, my accounts are secured, and every financial tie between us is cut. Ryan, you will not take anything from me." The room was silent except for the sound of Ryan stammering. "She's twisting it. This isn't what it looks like. Mom, Dad, you know I didn't mean." His voice cracked, desperate. But no one moved to defend him. His parents sat frozen, their shame visible. His friends avoided his eyes. I straightened my shoulders, looking at each person in turn. I loved Ryan with everything I had. I believed in him. But now everyone knows who he really is. I slid the envelopes across the table, one for his parents, one for him, and a few for others. "Read them yourselves if you doubt me." I lifted my glass, not in celebration, but in finality. "To freedom," I said simply. Then I set it down, picked up my purse, and walked away without looking back. The moment I left the restaurant, I felt the cool night air hit my face, sharp and clean. Behind me, I could still hear the low hum of voices, chairs scraping, and the mess I had just left behind. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had said what I came to say, and now it was his turn to deal with the wreckage. Inside, Ryan scrambled to hold on to the picture he had painted for everyone. He tried to laugh it off, calling it a misunderstanding, insisting I had taken his words out of context. But no one was smiling. His friends exchanged uneasy glances, whispers starting to move around the table like fire spreading through dry grass. "Man, you actually said that?" one of them muttered, his voice carrying across the table. Another shook his head, disgust plain on his face. "You're a user, Ryan. That's all this was for you." His parents sat stiff and silent, their faces pale as if the weight of their own words had been dropped in front of everyone. Linda dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, not meeting anyone's eye. Mark kept shifting in his chair, his pride cracked wide open. They tried to sit tall, to act unaffected, but the shame was written in every line of their bodies. Ryan's stammering turned to anger. He pounded the table, trying to pull the attention back, trying to twist the story into something else. "She's lying. She's making me look bad." But the more he yelled, the worse he looked. No one rushed to defend him. No one believed him. The same friends who once toasted to him, who called him lucky for finding me, now muttered under their breath, calling him a fraud, a fool, a parasite. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Where there had once been celebration, there was only disappointment and disgust. Meanwhile, I walked through the parking lot with my head held high. My heart was still pounding, but there was no weight dragging me down anymore. I felt lighter with every step. Dignity was the only thing I carried out of that place, and it was more than enough. Ryan, on the other hand, was left sitting in front of everyone he thought he could fool. His reputation crumbled in minutes. No speech, no excuse, no forced smile could glue it back together. He was exposed, and there was no undoing it. By the time I reached my car, I could hear my phone buzzing with messages, but I didn't check it. I already knew what they would say. People saw him for who he really was, and word would travel fast. He had spent years building an image of charm and ambition, and in a single night it all collapsed. I started the car, took one last deep breath, and drove away, leaving Ryan to choke on the ruins of his own life. The days after the rehearsal dinner felt strange, like I was stepping into a new world I hadn't planned for. The wedding date that had once circled my calendar in bold red was now just another square, empty and meaningless. At first, the silence of it all pressed down on me. I had built so much of my life around a future with Ryan, and ripping it away left me raw. But slowly, I realized that silence wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. I spent the first few mornings sitting by my window with coffee, letting myself breathe. The anger and heartbreak still came in waves, but underneath it all was something else, a small, steady pride. I hadn't let him take me down. I had stood up in front of everyone, spoken the truth, and walked away with my head high. That mattered more than anything. Sarah was with me almost every day. She brought over takeout, dragged me out for long walks, and never let me sit too long in my own thoughts. One evening, as we shared a pizza on my couch, she looked at me and said, Emily, you didn't just dodge a bullet. You proved to yourself you're stronger than you thought. That's what matters." Her words sank in. For so long, I had doubted myself, replaying how I could have missed the signs, how I could have fallen for someone like Ryan. But Sarah reminded me that strength wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about facing it head-on. I had done that, even when my heart was breaking. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into projects, late nights at the office, and goals I had pushed aside while planning the wedding. For the first time in months, I was doing things for myself, not to keep someone else happy. My boss noticed, my coworkers noticed, but most importantly, I noticed. Piece by piece, I was rebuilding who I had been before Ryan. Family dinners with my parents felt different too. They hugged me tighter, smiled wider, and told me they were proud of me. They never said, "I told you so," even though I knew they had been cautious about Ryan. Instead, they just supported me, giving me a safe place to land whenever the hurt returned. At night, I sometimes caught myself thinking of him, not with longing, but with clarity. I saw him now for exactly what he was, a man who thought he could play with someone's life for his own gain. And instead of feeling broken, I felt relief. I had escaped before the damage could become permanent. Healing wasn't fast, but it was steady. Each day I trusted myself a little more. I stopped blaming myself for his lies and started thanking myself for finding the courage to end it. For the first time in a long time, I believed I deserved better. Real love, not manipulation. And I promised myself I would never settle for less again. If you ever find yourself uneasy about someone's intentions, trust that feeling. Don't talk yourself out of it the way I did. I ignored the little signs because I wanted so badly to believe in love, to believe the man I gave my heart to couldn't possibly be using me. But instincts don't lie. They whisper to us when something feels off, and the more we push them aside, the louder the hurt will be when the truth finally comes out. Looking back now, I don't regret what I did at the rehearsal dinner. That moment, standing there with all eyes on me, wasn't easy. My hands could have shaken, my voice could have broken, and I could have backed down out of fear. But I didn't. I spoke the truth calmly and clearly, and I walked away without shame. That was the moment I freed myself, not just from Ryan, but from the hold his lies had over me. I know some people might say revenge should look like getting even, making him pay in the same way he tried to use me. But the real revenge was simpler. It was showing him, his parents, and everyone else that I refused to be the weak, naive girl they believed I was. It was cutting ties before he could take anything more from me. It was walking away whole while he was left sitting in the ashes of his own scheme. In the weeks that followed, I learned something important. Strength doesn't come from pretending you're not hurt. It comes from standing tall in the middle of the hurt and saying, "This will not break me." I won't lie. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, mornings I woke up with anger burning in my chest. But each time, I reminded myself of that moment when I chose dignity over silence. That memory carried me forward. Ryan will likely spend years dealing with the reputation he built for himself in just one evening. People saw him for what he was, and that can't be erased. As for me, I don't carry his shadow anymore. I carry only the lesson. Never ignore what your gut tells you, no matter how badly you want the fairy tale to be real. So if you're listening to my story and you see a little bit of yourself in it, hear me clearly. Do not wait until it's too late. Don't convince yourself you're overthinking or being dramatic. If the red flags are there, pay attention. You don't need to prove loyalty to someone who only sees you as a means to an end. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't shouting, fighting, or trying to make them suffer. Sometimes the best revenge is quieter. It's walking away with your pride intact, your future still yours, and your strength shining brighter than they ever expected. And that's exactly what I did.